supposed to be on. Right? It is not the summative snapshot. Now, some of these tools, though, that I'm going to be handing you, you could decide that if you've been planning where during a unit, and maybe one of these is going to be a summative snapshot, you are welcome to do that. But you shouldn't be entering all of these things in as grades into the grade book. Right? But students should be getting some kind of feedback on their growth as they go. So let me give you a couple examples of ways that one can keep track, and then ways that you might be able to give students some individualized.
Thank you.
Okay. So when you're planning, you want to be strategic about kind of setting something up. So this was done in an Excel document. And it's just a very simple way of keeping track of your class. So one, you know your outcomes that you're trying to teach during that unit. So you've listed those. And I will apologize, math is not my strength area. So some of the things I may have put at the top of the columns, you're going to tell me, Becky, those all would happen in one lesson, and we wouldn't be that AR about it. But you'll get the idea that you, no, really, because I put these down and I went, okay, I don't know, but what the heck, I'll throw them in. But I wanted them to be mathematical. You'll notice that by color and by number, you're getting some kind of impression of the class. So let's just say several days have gone by. You've done some formative assessment probes. You've scored. 2 means they've met and mastered the outcome, right? Strong evidence that they've mastered the outcome. A 1 is that there's some evidence from their formative assessment probe that they've met the outcome. And a 0 means not a thing. So as you're looking across the unit, what story do you tell just by looking at the graphic? What does it tell you? Any information?
You got the first stuff? Well,
Okay.
First off meaning the one that's earlier.
Okay, so
Just looking
earlier.
at the distribution of colors.
That's
Earlier
right.
is the-
That's right, Joe. So earlier in the unit, or at the beginning of the unit, you'll see a lot of green, or a lot of 2s, right? So you can see that there's quite a number of students who really seem to have met the standard, right, what you had. But then as you're moving across, you end up with a color shift. And so for you, as a teacher, what would that be causing you to think about, just naturally this way? Okay, so there might be some reteaching that's going to happen with this, or a new approach to this, depending on whether or not once you're looking at the formative assessment probe, whether it's reteaching or a completely different approach with students as well. Because sometimes our main strategy works for like 5 years in a row, and all of a sudden you get that particular class that like, oh my gosh, what just happened to me, right? Kind of thing. Right, and so you'll know that we're sort of maybe teaching-wise have to start putting on the brakes a little bit by where we thought we were going to go. And then if you have a way then, what you can do, I don't know how many of you know how to use mail merge to bring out of Excel into Word kids' individual scores, or your grade books, electronic grade books may allow you to set up a formative assessment page where students can get some of their own data. So you can also do some reflective things with your students for them to reflect on what they've learned, what they're still confused about, what they may still need to know. So we can kind of see how each student is doing as well as how we're doing just generally across. So this is just one way, a recommendation. I put the reference for where this came from. You'll see Dr. Willem again on this. This is a book called Embedded Formative Assessment, and it's a really nice read, as well, a book that you might want to check out of the library, and or see if maybe your district might actually have it somewhere. The second one comes from another approach, and so again, this is just being more systematic with your planning. Go ahead, Mary.
I was just wondering how you came up with the percents.
What the suggestion was, and I followed what was in the embedded book. They added up how many columns if it was 2 divided by. Oh, I hope I changed it to 20 from 22 as my divisor. So they just added up the average, at least I thought so. Again, as I told you, there's a reason I don't teach mathematics, even though I use Excel
Okay,
to do.
I guess,
Do you think
so
it's-
in other words, you gave a value to 1 and 2.
I gave a value, right, you add them as they are, so a 2 is the 2, 2, 1, and the zeros, and then you just average, to just give you a rough snapshot.
Oh.
Did you want it to be more exact? I mean, you
No,
could
no,
do
no.
that as a mathematician
I was
as well.
just curious
Sure.
of where, how we got percents out of that, but no, I understand that.
Right,
She just totaled them is all she did, Mary.
Yeah.
Right,
Oh,
sum and
Totaled them
divide.
and divided by 22. Where did 22 come from?
Did I get 22? No,
No, it
there's
is 22.
No, is it 22?
Yeah.
That might be my mistake. I had to take a column off because it wouldn't fit on one sheet of paper, but I may have forgotten to change my divisor, so I will apologize. All of you mathematically inclined people, which is everyone but me.
Oh, please.
Anyway,
Not true.
Well, 22 going down, 20 going up.
right, because there were 11 students, I think, in the class, and that's why that would have been for that. So hopefully but anyway, and that, all I'm trying to give you is an example of a tool that might be helpful for you as well. Again, this is sort of a private chart. I mean, some of you might keep public charts up in your classrooms as well for students. And then the orange sheet is just another way of sort of thinking through. And this one was interesting because it also mixed formative and summative as well. And I don't know, and not that I want to start the conversation here, but I know that some of your districts limit how much you can count your homework for, and that's because homework should be formative and not summative. And I know that if you get into any of Dr. Willem's work, he will make a concession and say if you have to count it, don't count it more than 5%. He just sets it and says it shouldn't over-influence. So yes, you could have a kid that never does homework and gets an A on the test. And so what he asks and challenges us is to think about is what is it that what is a grade for? And if it's their knowledge, not their attitudes, and not their persistence, because those should be talked about somewhere else. And again, each of us has to personally reach a place for this. And again, some of your school districts have interceded in what you can or can't count or the balance of things. Joe?
So, going on, I completely agree, by the way. My district is heading over towards not counting homework and just counting just targets. So homework is no longer counted. It's not even, well, the book is changing. A lot of changes are happening. So we're not counting homework in their grade. But it's across the board for all math teachers. It's like if we can't count homework, they're not going to do it. And so this idea that one of the teachers came up with, and that's why I stuck it up on the board, was homework quizzes. Does research saying that this homework quiz isn't meant for gaining understanding, it's just making sure that they do their homework. And then also maybe even to do like a formative assessment things, like if they're doing their homework and you can check if they got it and then grade it in that sense. So what does research say about like grading homework, quote unquote homework quizzes? It's not really meant to be summative. So the points are not going to be like what you're saying. It's not even a percentage.
No,
You
exactly.
can't even give 5%.
No, that's why you have to decide what kind of pressure do you want on the students, because there might be some preparation work you do want them to do the night before and bring in to them. Again, you'll have to balance that out, and then you'll have to decide that percentage if you wish to include it to keep, because we have, actually over time, I think we've given homework a bad name, and
Right.
now we're suffering the pendulum swinging the other way, where now there are some districts that are even forbidding it, which is strange to me in some regard, that what's happening with this. So when I don't know what we're calling them, doing
Practice.
something to bring back, project that you do outside of class, to bring a learning, well, it is a learning opportunity, and I think it gets back to setting that environment of learning and what you want in that environment. I wish I had the magic answer for you. Go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I wish we
Do
did.
you, I don't know, do you realize what they're doing for homework quizzes? Where basically we're just copying whatever we have on the sheet, is what a homework quiz is, right?
Yeah.
So it's the end of the week. But so it's just,
Right.
if you got it, if you got it, copied it, somewhere else, you're just recopying it on another sheet of paper.
Sure, and it's sort of an accountability piece for the students, and then it also gives you a bit of a snapshot. And if you want to give some points to that, to kind of keep the pressure on, because we do know we're motivated by those kinds of things, it's nothing that says you can't do that. But I think they're trying to move us out of the realm, the folks who do research is who I mean, a realm of maybe overemphasizing that somehow this out-of-school work has more weight than anything else that you might have been doing even from your testing, the summative testing. And so that's where this homework piece, and we have a philosophical conversation as teachers about what is it we want to accomplish through homework, and why are we assigning it in the preponderance that we're assigning it. So there's a conversation to be had about whether we've overused, and do we need to be more purposeful or creative about what we're asking them to do. I don't know a complete answer, because sometimes what I feel is happening now from when I was teaching younger students is that you have less autonomy to maybe have a say within your classroom, versus the district now is addressing this by some policy statements, and now you're kind of caught one way or the other in trying to continue to help your students learn as a learning tool. So a toughie, but trying to give you some strategies as well. Oh, that was just another tool. This one's a little more purposeful in how it's asking you to think through. And this one looks as if it has blended both summative and formative on the table below, that you're kind of intermixing a little bit of a snapshot. But again, that could be a student, or it could be the teacher's thinking plan as well. So it's up to you how you want to use any of the tools, what makes sense. One is a thinking tool for you as well as we go. The folks that worked on these probes that I gave you also have a heuristic tool for us to think about where do you plan and how do you plan for what kinds of formative assessment that you want. So let me give you a bit of an enlargement of this circle. They call this the Mathematics Assessment Instruction and Learning Cycle, called MAIL. And when it's for science, it's called SAIL. So you might even see it out there for science as well.
It's another acronym I have to learn.
No, I know,
It's
isn't it? It's
awful.
an amazing kind of thing. You know, you kind of go, oh my gosh. What they want you to think about is the outer ring, all right? And then you'll have some questions that relate to each of the outer ring labels. But when you're trying to plan, so when I asked you, before lesson beginning, during, and end, when you're being more purposeful about choosing your probe, you might also be more purposeful about what is it you really want to know. So are you really asking whether they're ready? Are they ready for this unit? That's a readiness kind of thing. So your formative assessment probe might actually be that before the unit you do a pretest, just to see if they even remember anything. Because you know they should have brought some background knowledge with them, at least you're hopeful, right? And your pre-assessment might be, so that testing for readiness. Or are you really trying to see if they are developing the concepts and the skills? Because you've now taught several days of lessons. There's supposed to be a certain understanding you would expect. So do you use a formative assessment probe that will get at that? What they do ask in this model as well is for you to think about the students being engaged in reflection as well as self-assessment, right? And in a way, our homework video was a little bit of both of that happening, because the students had to look at their problem, get ready to discuss it after they had done it, and then as they were listening and sharing, they're kind of self-assessing their work as they go. And so they're learning either where they made their mistakes or where they were okay, or a little bit of both. So this is just sort of a tool to kind of think about how to use this as you're choosing the probes and things that you would like to use in your work. And what they talked about is using the strategy of a quest. So as you're planning your tool, you have some kind of question in mind. What is it that you want to know from your formative assessment probe. So that's designing sort of that question you want to know. You're trying to use the probe to uncover students' understanding about something, so making it more explicit to you. So you're not trying to just say, oh, I think, you know, Jane knows this, but John doesn't. Well, do you know that for sure or not? You know, kind of thing, and what's going on. That you find a way then to use one of the facts, and then you examine and analyze the data in some way. So that would be the E. All right, so examining your data, and determining your next steps in the lesson would be to seek that next step. So what is the next step that you're trying to make and take with students? Because it could be that the kids are okay and you can just move on with the plan the way you designed, or you can go, uh-oh, the brakes are on, I can't move on, we need to do something else, and so you do it. And then you teach your lesson and get some information, and again, the cycle will just sort of keep continuing. I mean, it just continues. But where you want to put it, so you're kind of on this quest as we go. All right? Kind of thinking about these things. All right. Let me pass out, gee, if you have a favorite color folder, you can actually choose. Do you have a favorite color? All right. What color do you want?
I'll make it easy.
Amanda? Okay, well,
Purple. Mary wants purple.
Mary wants purple?
Yeah.
Okay. Joe?
I'll take orange.
Oh, orange?
Oh, I thought peach color. I saw peach color. I'll take that one.
There's yellow. I don't know if I had orange, actually.
Throw that color right after the other, this one.
All right.
I'll take this. Oh, sorry. What?
Do you have a, yes, Amanda, do you have a favorite color? I mean, I put yellow down, but I can give you another color on it.
Oh, yeah, it takes us.
Okay. Let me talk about what's in the folder and then share some other resources with you, so you'll know what you have. I've given you a blue sheet at the front of your folder with just text-based resources, but in a moment when we go up to this link, I tried to make sure that all the internet sites have a link up here, but on this resource as well. And then the way to get to this page, I put at the top of the blue sheet. So I've given you my short address, but even a shorter address with the tiny URL. There's a list of some things to think about, 10 things to think about formative assessment for you to take a look at. And then all the probes, we only use 2 of them today, but I have 5 different probes that are here. And these came from a book that's called Mathematics Formative Assessment, 75 Practical Strategies for Linking Assessment as well. And so I had copyright permission to give you these. So there's 5 that are in here. So you'll see the Frayer model, you'll see the card sort. Ellen told me you might have done the always, sometimes, never true last week as well. So that's in here as well with directions. Let me look at the last 2. Justified list is one of them. And then the last one is called the strategy probe. So there'll be examples here and some information about them for things that you may want to use with your students. And then going out on the internet and looking for some others. There's a template for always, sometimes, never here in the next packet that you have, followed by some other commit and toss, sometimes called snowball, where the students write something down, they actually throw it around the classroom. Well, no, they do say if management's a problem, to find other ways to pass them. But it's a way for students to comment, but then not have to talk about their own comments if they are wrong or feel like they're wrong. But it's called commit and toss, actually, is comment and toss. Focus listing is one of the choices here as well. The Frayer model with an example, if you needed another example. Picture note making is another interesting strategy as well. And the one on recall some, let's me.
Oh.
The thinking diagram, and I
Did he
think that
get
was
it?
the last one, all right? So, those are just, again, another.
Very nice, thank
of-
you.
And then